Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Caroline Clark. On today's On the Clock, he's an incredible artist and leader in the worlds of theater, film, and television. You may or may not know his name, but you surely know director Kenny Leon's stunning resume of work. It includes American Son, Fences, Hairspray Live, The Wiz Live, and Lorraine Hansberry's timeless work, A Raisin in the Sun, which he's directed several times, both for television and stage. His 2014 production starring Denzel Washington earned him the Tony Award for Best Direction. Little known facts about our guest: he's a former actor himself, a proud graduate of the HBCU Clark Atlanta University, and I have to stick this in, an alum of People's 50 Most Beautiful People. I had to throw that in, Kenny. How are you, Kenny Leon? Welcome.
I'm great. It's good to see you.
It's really good to see you. Kenny, you know, when COVID first hit, you were on Broadway with A Soldier's Play, which was doing phenomenally well. Did you ever in your career foresee a time where Broadway's lights would close and your work would come to a grinding stop for any reason, no less something like this?
I had not imagined that, but there's always space in my head for something like that. I think I live by something folks refer to as a biblical worldview. So, you know, I am honored and blessed to live a life at a time in the early part of the 21st century that include people like Caroline Clark and Denzel Washington and Audra McDonald and Felicia Rashad and so many amazing people, politicians like Stacey Abrams. And every generation has its challenges. So these are ours. I did not see it coming, but you know, it's the life we have. We can't throw our hand back in. It's what we do with it, how we learn from it. And so we had, like, you know, 3 performances left of A Soldier's Play. A wonderful production with David Allen Greer and Blair Underwood, an amazing cast. And I think the people that were supposed to see it saw it. And we've been honored, even since COVID, we've been honored with the Drama League Award for Best Play and the Drama Desk Award for Best Play. So it's received a lot of honors, but more than anything, like with all of my work, it's about who sees the work. And how we honored the writer, Charles Fuller, who wrote this play like 40 years ago, about a time 40 years before that. And so all those years later, 80 years later, we get to revive that play and talk about race in the military and love of country and fighting for country and making America right again. And it's just interesting that these times now, when we're talking about race all over our country, it's like all of the work that we've been doing has sort of, you know, we've been telling these stories and fighting for injustice for a long time. You know, when I did the first production of A Raisin in the Sun with P. Diddy and Sanaa Lathan and Audra McDonald and Felicia Rashad, well, I remember going to the original director of the first production when Lorraine presented that play, the first drama on Broadway, and I went to see Lloyd Richards, the director, and I talked to him about my respect for him and how we are just a process of what they delivered, you know, many years before. And then I went and contacted Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee and invited them to come to my rehearsals, and Ruby and Ossie took me up on that. And so Ruby gave me notes all during previews, you know. You know, we've been fighting their stories. We stand on the shoulders of people like Ruby and Ossie and Woody King Jr. and the Negro Ensemble and Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier. So each generation, you know, we have an obligation and a responsibility to move it forward, to move things forward. So no, Caroline, I did not see Broadway closing down, but I welcome the challenges of how to squeeze something good out of this. You know, except for the loss of life, which is tremendous and huge, and You know, we lost two uncles and an aunt in my family personally. So I know a lot of us have lost people through the because of this. But if you can sort of put that over to the right-hand side of this whole stillness has been what the world needed and what America has really needed. You know, we need to reflect and we need to reveal and we need to challenge and we need to, make America better.
Yeah. Kenny, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you in particular is that you have always been very thoughtful about the work that you take on. Mm-hmm. And, everyone is aware of the high profile things that you've done, but you've always been deeply embedded in regional work and regional theater, and really making a difference in those smaller stages that people, many people may not be aware of. But mm-hmm. your work has always had a vision that is unabashedly through your lens, right? Through a Black man's lens. So even when you did Steel Magnolias, that was for Lifetime, right?
Yes.
It was a Black show, right? You reimagined it with Black characters, where it was about Black women and Black family within that same Southern tradition. And if you sort of draw a line through all your work from one thing to another, it all remains so acutely relevant, especially at this moment. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people have been talking to you about American Son, because that story is sort of very obvious within what we've all been dealing with in terms of Black Lives Matter. But when you think about the full body of your work in this moment in our history, what are the pieces that really stand out the most for you as being the most relevant and meaningful? And what can we take from them in this moment? What do you take from them?
Oh, that's a tough one. I always say my best work is yet ahead. So I feel like I always try to approach what's most relevant today. And so I would say that A Soldier's Play was the most relevant play because it was my last. I've been looking at, or I've been wanting to stage the revival of Melvin Van Peebles' Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death. So I've been thinking about that for like 20 years. And I think I might have an opportunity to present that, real soon, because Melvin was one of the true greats in our country and he was ahead of his time, and so I sort of look at the things that click to my heart. And I always think that, some plays are for other people and some plays are for me. And I think there's enough in our world for everyone. So I'm trying to tell stories like that. There's a writer, Cheryl West, whom I love. And I think that there are not enough plays produced by Black women on Broadway. So I would love to do maybe her Jar the Floor on Broadway. I'm set to do a new movie with Lifetime, the story of Mahalia Jackson, which, during this whole pandemic, I came home March 13th when Broadway was closed the night before, I believe. And so I self-quarantined for since then and for 2 weeks. And then I've been sheltering in place for 12, 13 weeks. So I'm a cat of routine. So I begin each day with, an hour and a half, 2 hours of Mahalia Jackson. And then I meditate and then I pray. Well, 7 weeks into that routine, I got a call from Lifetime to direct a movie about Mahalia Jackson. They had no idea I wake up every morning listening to her. And she was, to me, she had a little bit of Malcolm X, a little bit of Martin Luther King, a little bit of Mandela, a little bit of Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, all wrapped in one. And she was a woman that lived through, she was born in, I think, early 1900s. So she lived through the 1918 pandemic. She lived through the Great Depression. She lived through the Civil Rights Movement. She was always searching for love in her life, never found it. But she was a big civil rights advocate and partnered with Dr. King and helped move that movement forward. And so she's just one of my sheroes. So I get a chance to really, hopefully go into rehearsal and production of that in September, October, depending on how COVID treats us. And we're going to try to, do all the protocols. And, if it means testing every day, that's what we do. But I want to get that story out because Mahalia had a lot to do with actually what we are seeing being revealed now, that our connectedness to other human beings, how we serve each other, how we spend our time on the planet, how we recapture what is indeed meant by a moral conscience. And I think some of that has been lost in the last few years. So I'm also afraid to see what other artists will do on the other side of this pandemic. I want to, because writers are hibernating and they're thinking and they're getting motivated and they're getting focused on what they should be writing. Actors, I'm afraid to see what actors like Samuel L. Jackson and Denzel and all the young artists, Issa Rae. I want to see what all these young artists will do on the other side of this. Because if you are the same artist you were before the pandemic, if you're the same artist on the other side of this, then you haven't grown as a person. So I'm excited to see what artists offer our world, because sometimes the answers are not going to come from the political arena, and sometimes they don't come from the religious arena. Sometimes they come from great artists.
It's interesting that you expect a lot of blossoming and growth to come out of this. I'm sure you've already seen some of it. I know you're in touch with a lot of these people. How has all this changed you? How's all this made you grow?
Wow. It reminds me of when I did the first production of my first Broadway show, was A Raisin in the Sun with P. Diddy and that wonderful cast. And going into that, I thought I gave 100%. Once I worked with Puffy, I realized that he gives 125%. So I was like, wait a minute, because he had never acted before.
It was his debut, right? It was total debut. Yeah.
But one thing about him was like, you're not going to outwork him. He would be in rehearsal 8 hours, then meet with Susan Batson, his acting coach, for a couple of hours, then come pick me up and go out and talk about theater, and then go home where he had a replica of the set in his house. He was like, I'm going to do everything possible to be the very best actor in this role that I can be. And then I realized that, Kenny, you thought you were doing a lot. You have another 25% more to give. So I sort of feel that way now. I thought I was giving enough, but I've been working on this downtime on my mind, my body, and my soul. And so I want to be stronger in all those areas. So, over 60 now, I think that I'm probably in the best physical shape that I've ever been in, because every day, push-ups, sit-ups, which I was doing, but I've added to that routine. I've added the Peloton bike. So I'm on the Peloton bike 45 minutes, then I go for another walk, then I end it with another set of calisthenics at night. I get up, I read the Bible, I read other spiritual books. I'm reading these books by Ryan Holiday now about stealing the mind, about taking emotion and anger out of things, just being calm. And so I'm working on all facets of myself. So, and then, God reminds us, we should keep growing, so I think I'm growing now, and I want to see the fruits of this growth. But I feel energized, I feel focused. I have projects set up. I'm also going to spend some time with teaching. I've always wanted to teach a little in the midst of work. So I'm actually going to teach some students virtually for a while at San Diego State University, film and theater students. So I'm going to teach. I'm going to prepare for my films, which I'm also going to do the Kirk Franklin story as a theatrical release. But, then we have by the time Broadway comes back, next spring or next summer, next fall, I'll be ready to do some of those plays. So I don't know. I'm energized to do my best work, and hopefully it can impact the lives and be the voices of some people who maybe not have a voice for themselves, or they don't have a platform to deliver their voice. We all have voices and we all have stories. So, yeah.
You mentioned women earlier and how we haven't really seen enough stories by and about women in theater and film. And, in the last few years, I know you have had to factor in a lot of changes that came about from the Me Too movement. And now we have this health reality, and we have Black Lives Matter on top of it. How do you expect, once you're back in production with various things for both the COVID pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, to impact the structural realities of what you do, right? Because there were some significant changes put into effect around Me Too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you think? Do you think there'll be a similar, awakening and intentional retraining of people around Black Lives Matter and around, the physicality of theater in terms of health, masks, all these things? How do you foresee these things having an impact?
Hopefully there's a reawakening. This is like I told my sisters, like Kerry Washington, Felicia Rashad. I've learned a great deal from the women in my life. And even when I thought I was doing the right thing, I realized that I could do better. You know what I mean? Carrie gave me a good example one time. She said, so if you're riding an elevator and you go to the top floor and you're on the elevator with a woman, what do? I said, well, I'm a good Southern boy. I said, after you, have a good evening. And she says, no. She said, you should get off first so that the woman knows that it's safe. So you say, good night, have a good evening, and you get off the elevator first. And I was like, wow, see, I learned that. I mean, that's an example of some things I learned. So I think that as humans, there are some things, if we keep an open mind, there are many things that we can learn that make us better and that don't take anything away from us. Last year, when I did Much Ado About Nothing with Danielle Brooks, I learned a lot about how women see themselves and how women are not all the same and don't aspire to all look the same. And I remember doing that production when we had introductions, we had to introduce ourselves by pronouns. And I was like, what is this? I didn't grow up with this. And then I thought about it and I was like, but that's not hurting me. That's not taking anything away from me to say, hi, I'm Kenny, he, him, and if it helps the world be safer for even one person, is worth it. So I feel the same thing about race. We've been fighting these stories. I mean, injustices for a long time. But I think this is America's greatest challenge. And it's not easy. It's not easy to say all Black folk are good and all white folk are bad. We're looking to get to that place where there's one humanity and one justice system. And I think, and trying to solve this, I think that we all have to be heard. I think that Black folks need to be heard. And I also think that as we're going through this, we want to say to our white brothers and sisters that we hear you too. There's room to hear you too. And we can sit around the table and let's see how that looks. The complexity of that, or the challenge of that, is for us to actually go through this process in a real, authentic way and not to become not to become what white folks have been, or what white America, what it has been to Black Americans, not to become the reverse of that, because that wouldn't be the answer either. And as I grow, and I work with a lot of young folks, and I see how they are already taking steps to make the world different. They are already, their world is more international. They have friends. When you ask someone, you ask your daughter, if your daughter says, "Hey, my friend is coming over tonight," when I was growing up, when you said my friend is coming over, you knew that that friend probably was a Black person, you know. But now it's like, oh, your friend is coming over. You don't know that friend is Black or white or trans or gay, or just don't know that. So, and I think that's healthy. I think we have to evolve into and embrace the way the world is going. As long as we have a moral center and our intentions are good. So I am learning as a person and as a director, and I am radically optimistic about all that I could learn, especially from those who are different from me, So I want to, I always tell folks, I said, if you're 20 years old, you're going to be 20 once. You have something to offer the world that no other age group does. When you're 60, you have something to offer the world that no one else does. 30, 40, whatever age you are, you have something to offer that no one else does. And that's what's so beautiful about the world. If we can figure out what it is that we have to offer and what it is we can hear from all of those around us. So the way I look at it, if it's something not hurtful or discriminatory toward me, I embrace it. I embrace the variety of storytelling. I'm a storyteller, so I want to hear everybody's story. And I think that if we hear, and I mean, the Netflix model is a great model. Netflix, and I've done 3 projects with them. Netflix, they sort of try to tell everybody's story. And what they have proven is that that's a good business model too. And I think that Broadway and theater can learn a lot from that model and not be afraid of that. Let's tell everybody's story. Let's do musicals, dramas, comedies, Latinos, Blacks, women, gay, trans, Gen X, millennials. Let's tell everybody's story. That's the world I want to embrace and be a part of.
The artistic community is generally thought of as a bastion of liberalism, right? There's a lot of diversity. Everybody knows artists of every, race, shape, hue, background. And yet, you talk about the Netflix model. Netflix is a relatively new company. And despite the liberalism that the artistic community is known for, there have been some really intractable barriers to diversity. So I'm curious to know, as we see your beautiful Tony sitting behind you, and we can barely see your twin back there, Robert Abbott, which for people who don't know, George Abbott, which is the highest award that a director can get in your business, right? And yet, I'm sure you've encountered discrimination in your career. What are the battles that you find yourself, even at this level of success, with a George Abbott sitting behind you, and all of the awards you've gotten, and how well so many of the productions you've done and the actors you've worked with, what are the battles that you find yourself still fighting most frequently, and why do you think it's been so difficult to move forward?
First of all, I always, like my dear friend August Wilson said, we're not owed the awards, we're just owed the work. But the awards give us fuel to get another job. And that's the good thing. But historically, if you look at cinema, if you look at theater, if you look at arts in our country, museums in our country, it's a microcosm of America. So, how long did it take Hollywood to even slowly start getting this act together? I mean, I was looking at, what's that Melvin Van Peebles movie, Sweet Ass, God, anyway, he was the first, it was the first black exploitation movie. And Melvin in the story made the guy from the hood a hero. And it was a black cast film, and it did very well, made some money.
Sweetback's badass song.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And then, but, after that, and Melvin starred in that movie and he directed it, but he wasn't offered another job as an actor. He wasn't offered another job as a director, in Hollywood at the time. But Hollywood took that model and then they came out with Superfly. And now the drug dealer was the hero. You know what I mean? So there have been a lot of roadblocks to Hollywood getting its act together, especially with Black Americans being directors, being producers. In fact, some of the times, what is synonymous with best at a while was like best meant anything but black. We want the best directors. We really want the best directors. And they could show you a list of 100 directors and with all the great work, like in the 80s and 90s that Spike Lee and Bill Dukes and Judi Dash were doing, like they wouldn't get considered in that group of, best. Yeah. So I think Hollywood still has work to do. What's interesting now is that we have more platforms. So we're able to tell our stories, whether it's a webisode or it's streamed or it's, a feature or it's cable. So you have more stories there. But just like America, your project is only as black as the first voice of your company. For instance, if you have a theater company, no matter how diverse and inclusive you say you are, if your board of directors chairman is white, if your artistic director is white, if your managing director is white, if your head of production is white, you keep counting, and then you're like down to the 8th or 9th person, and then you have a black voice. You know what I mean? So your actions tell us, how diverse you really are. Yeah. So this time we're in now, it's like there are some people who want to get off of this they just want to do what's right so they can move on and get to the way things were. What do I have to do? Do I have to give $100,000 to a mentorship program? Do I have to hire a black company manager? What do I have to do? And then there are other whites, I feel, come to the table genuinely. I want to be in a relationship with you. How can we make this more inclusive and diverse and fair? So I think we got a lot of work cut out for ourselves. And I think that in a while we'll see. And the big part of diversity is trust. So if folks trust you with your money, if they trust your voice, so even if you hire me to direct a film, but then you micromanage and have to micromanage every artist I bring on to help tell that story, do you really trust me? Are you treating me the same way that you would Steven Spielberg?
Has that happened to you?
Absolutely. Come on, I'm a black artist trying to work in America. My mother always said, if you're going to be in entertainment, you either have to be a snake or a snake charmer. And I'm not a snake. So you have to always kind of charm your way around certain things, It's like racism is alive and well. Yes, I've been on many projects when, you know, you're on a project and you say, wow, I need this person, this person, this person on the creative team to help tell the story. Well, Kenny, I don't know, you know, I have this costume designer here that I really need to be on this project. So if you want this project, I got to have that. Now, maybe you can have a sound person that can be a person of color. So those are the kind of
negotiations,
those deals you make,
yeah,
just to get up and tell the story.
Yeah.
And if you look at, even if you look at Broadway and you say, okay, try to remember when there's been a complete Black creative team on any musical. So when I'm talking about where the writer is Black, the director is Black, the choreographer is Black, the sound designer is Black, the set designer is Black. It has never happened.
Never?
Not that I know of, unless it was a show that was already, like back in the 70s, it was a show that was already off Broadway or coming up through Negro Ensemble Company. It's like, okay, we'll do that. But in recent times, you can't, you know, I mean, try to think about it. I mean, no. But there have been many productions that have had an all-white team. I'm not arguing white or Black. I'm just saying sometimes, you know, once in a while, it benefits the project to have all of the people coming from the same culture. Sometimes, just like you would think in my 12, 13, I don't know how many Broadway shows I've done, but you would think when you look at the major press, so you take, you know, the New York Times, and it says, okay, New York Times, once in a while, you say, have you ever had a person who was Black write about your art from the major press? It's like, no. You know, so it's like, and not that you want good or bad reviews, it's like, it would be nice if a writer who understood the nature of hip hop and where that came from and how that integrates with something that was written 40 years ago. It would be nice to know somebody who knows the history of Melvin Van Peebles and Spike Lee and Ossie Davis and who can tie all that together and who understands your community and understands what you're trying to say to your community. You know, not every time, or as an artist, am I trying to talk to the entire community. Yeah. Every time am I trying to talk to the white community, the Black community, but you know, that's a longer story.
But this is part of the fear, right? Because I do think on some level, whether you're talking about art, whether you're talking about business, whether you're talking about education, no matter what you're talking about, I think there is a fear, right? It comes from, and I know you don't think this way, but from this philosophy of scarcity, right? That there is a finite amount of everything in the world, but it comes down to money, right? And opportunity. And so if we get more, then they get less. And I think you end up very quickly, before we even get really much past the starting gate, coming into this, you know, this clenched debate about, it's just like the debate that's happening with Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, right? It becomes this all or nothing scenario that doesn't allow for, you know, a whole lot of creativity and innovation and thought around, you know what, there's enough. Why don't we figure out a more equitable way, right? Because that is the heart of it, to approach life and to approach this country and to approach art or whatever it is.
When I started a theater company, True Colors Theater Company, that Jamil Jude now serves as artistic director, the core values of that company was boldness, laughter, respect, and abundance. I thought that all the work should be bold. You should laugh every day. You should respect every culture, every race, every gender, every sex, and that we lived in a world of abundance and not scarcity. There's enough of everything on the planet for everyone. And so I don't let people take me off there saying there's not enough. The historically Black theaters in our country are underfunded. And in fact, I can say this truthfully because I led a major theater company that was not African American, the Alliance Theater, for 10 years. And then I created True Colors Theater Company, which was the culturally specific theater. Now, I abided by the same principles of casting. I worked with the union, same standard. But when it came to the dispersing of money from foundations and businesses, it was really different. It was like, wait a minute, it's the same type of thing that I did at the big theater, and I got 200,000, and now I can get 10,000 for the same work. So there is an inequity in the country of how these culturally specific theaters are funded. And they're all are nonprofit theaters, which means that the community has a lot to say about what the money is used for.
Right. So that's a really good point, because I know when you were at the Alliance Theater, one of the things that you're credited for, in addition to your artistic mastery, was the fact that you significantly increased the coffers at that theater, right? It went from something like the endowment from 1 million to 5 million or something like that, which is super significant. Then you're doing this for a Black theater. What is that about? Is that about only being able to get money from African Americans and us not having enough to begin with? What are the barriers you hit there?
Let me correct that, is because everything that I did at the Alliance, I didn't do everything great, and I didn't do everything, I can't, there were some downtimes too. I went from 20,000 subscribers and took the theater down to 13,000. But the board of directors was really supportive of what we wanted to be, and how we wanted to do it. And I think that the thing that's just missing in our world throughout is the word trust. So the corporate world and the foundation world has no real trust of these African American institutions, but they trust the bigger institutions because they've been there longer, because they've had a relationship with the company, for years, and so it just takes a little work to one of the things when I first started True Colors Theater Company, I had a multi-year grant from Diana Blank. And it was great because it's like, here's $1 million over 3 years. And it's like, and I did well by that. So those type of institutions need more 3-year grants. They need more trust. And if you don't trust them, then you end up creating a ghetto mentality, because you say, okay, here's $5, see what you can do with that. And then 12 months later, you got to beg for another $5 and a beg for $5 instead of doing the art. And the artists at these other bigger institutions, they have more relaxing time to create art.
What do you think that the pandemic will do, or have you seen already what it's doing to this funding issue? Because, you do sort of have these two things that are at odds with each other. COVID suppressed funding, the nation is obviously struggling, and then Black Lives Matter gives people a shift, and maybe they're finding more of an interest trying to find more funds. What do you see happening there?
I think all these things happen. I think there's some good. One of the things that it's been revealed. So we're talking out loud about the discrepancies. And so it's forcing companies to decide where they stand, on what ground do they stand. So we'll see what happens in the next year or so, but it's time for a shift in everything. It's time for a personal shift. It's time for community shift. It's time for shifts in our country. And I'm asking myself, if I say Black Lives Matter, and your response is all lives matter, I just don't get it. It's like, yeah, all lives do matter, but I just said Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, and your response should be like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. And we're not at that place in our country now. So if I say Black Lives Matter and a white friend or enemy says back, all lives matter, to me, that's a person who's trying to hide their racist beliefs, because what they're really saying subtextually is, no, Black lives don't matter. That's what they're saying. And if they can't hear that, they just think that I'm naive. So, it's like if you said white lives matter, I'm like, yeah, white lives matter. Okay. And, now, do Black lives matter? You know what I mean? It's like that's where we come, and especially in a country that 401 years ago, enslaved Black people and kept some of those structures in place until the present day. We have to be honest to admit that. And we're not at that place yet because we have a leader of our country who is using this. I mean, in my way of thinking, I don't want to get too political, but in my way of thinking, it's like, maybe the writing is on the wall. It looks like I'm going to lose this election. So what way can I win this election? I could win this election if I cause total chaos and people get crazy and they resort to violence out of their desperation and out of their COVID going wild and crazy. You know what I mean? So I don't want to think like that, but a part of me feels like that's what this government is doing. And so I really feel and I feel worse when it comes to elected officials who happen to be Republican and who like the other day, Republicans had an opportunity when the president said 99% of people who get COVID-19, they're fine. And then when you ask the politician to say, can you speak on that? Can you just say that what he said was irresponsible? And to a person, they never could come out and say, you know what? He was irresponsible. I love him as a president, but he was irresponsible in this moment. They can't even say that. So I'm like, what is that about? And they have to live with themselves with that. But anyway, I'm all for good, well-intentioned people, Republicans, Democrats, white, Black. I'm looking for the day when we have one justice system, one human race, because these boxes, 20 or 30 years from now, these boxes of Black and white, they cannot contain us. They will not contain us getting to our true, better selves. They won't work. That doesn't mean we can't be prideful of our culture, be knowledgeable of our history. But I'm looking for a day that we can just get to a better place, a more honest place, and not feeling really good about a lot of things about our country right now. And I think some of that stuff is going to find its way into some of our storytelling on the screen, on stage. And hopefully if we keep telling those stories, we can do our part and help to change this country and this world for the better.
Yeah. I know that your worldview and your optimism and your faith were largely shaped in Tallahassee, Florida by your grandmother, who you wrote about beautifully in your memoir, Take You Wherever You Go. What do you think, your grandmother lived through a lot. You were talking earlier about Mahalia Jackson and all that she lived through. Your grandmother was, not far in age from her. What do you think your grandmother would say about this time? What did she plant in you that is helping you to navigate this time with a vision for better?
She would say, baby, this, God's trying to talk to you. And he did not make us to be timid people. And there is beauty in every day. You just got to find the beauty in every day. And you got to keep trying to make this a just and godly world. Do your part. That's what she would say. And I remember recently I had a talk with probably this person. I don't think I've ever said this out loud, but the person besides my grandmother and my mother that has had the most impact on me, certainly as an artist, but maybe as a person too, is Samuel L. Jackson. And he's been a friend for a long time. And anytime I feel like I need to talk something out or figure it out, I'm always, I give him a call. I remember when I first did that production of Raisin, when I was casting Puffy in that role, and there was a lot of pushback, like, you know, Puffy's never acted before, and people didn't know I had been trying to get every famous person of the right age to play the role, and nobody wanted to do it. And Puffy auditioned for it, and he did a great job. And I said, man, you don't have technique, but you have honesty and authenticity, and we can do this together. But I remember calling Sam and I said, so man, what should I do, man? I'm thinking about casting Diddy in this role. And Sam said, well, they're going to sharpen their pencils either way, and that could be a good thing. But if you think that you can get that performance out of him, you got to go with your heart, man. So, every crucial time in my life like that, I'm always talking to Sam Jackson. So at least I'm saying it out loud now. He's probably had the most impact on me. And when this whole pandemic broke out this time, I remember calling him. I said, hey man, I'm thinking about getting my mask and hitting the streets. And he said, hey, yo, calm down, calm down. I said, what? He said, man, we did our marching, 30, 40 years ago. We was out in the streets. And if things were reversed, we will be out there now. But he says, those big crowds don't lend themselves to us being out there with COVID-19 going on. So what we can do is lend our dollars and lend our voices and match that with these young people's energy and passion, the ones out there doing the right thing. So, I applaud all the young people who are just like, you know what, enough is enough. That's a great thing, and a lot of times we just look for what our young people are doing poorly. And we are doing something. We don't have a lot of discipline in some areas, but I'm always I welcome and embrace the times and the challenges that we're faced with. And I think together, collectively, we can create a better, more just world. And we can tell a greater diversity of stories.
Before we go, I know, you mentioned Sam, you mentioned Felicia earlier, Rashad. I know that as you talk about collectively what we can do, there's a group of artists, largely African-American, Black, who have come together with you in the core there, leading the charge, to do something. Can you talk about that at all? Can you talk about what you all are doing and who's involved?
I think with every revolution, a revolution brings, it brings passion, it brings emotion. So everybody's wanted to do something. And I think right now, at my last count, it's like 15 or 16 different organizations trying to take a stand for ridding the world of injustices, especially in the entertainment field. And I have chosen to work with a group of 19 founders. All of us have started something called Black Theater United. And the most important word of that Black Theater United is united. We want to be in the middle of uniting ideas and people to move theater specifically forward, to fight political injustice, especially in our communities and in our prisons. So we see all that as all equal and as all tied together. And so, our first major event is coming up with Shirley Eiffel this week. And then we have something coming up with Stacey Abrams. Then we have a mentorship program that we're going to try to figure out ways to get Black people more invested in careers in design, for instance, but more than that, to put dollars to that and to create a pathway to work in the industry and not just a 1-year internship. So, you know, it's a great group of people, include people like Audra McDonald and Felicia Rashad and Billy Porter and Brian Stokes Mitchell, Allison Mitchell. So it's a really good LaShange. So just keep an eye out for it and go to our website, Black Theater United, and find out what you need and join us as allies and make a donation if you can. But, you know, just trying to figure out in between all the work we're doing, how we can collectively put our experiences and our minds together to create a more just world in theater and in our country.
Final question. I know that, you know, we had this discussion recently, and I feel like all Black people are having this discussion about your white friends calling you to ask you to help them help you. And so I think going to Black Theater United's website is one way, but it occurred to me, you know, honestly, Kenny, as I looked at your body of work, that I could sort of float that to some of my friends who ask me, you know, how do I learn more? How do I become a better ally? There are lots of lists out there now of books and websites and resources, but, you know, your body of work has a breadth and diversity to it that I think could really serve some people who are looking to become allies. Mm-hmm. Do you see it that way? And if there's sort of a theme that rises from the breadth of your work that could be instructive to allies and wannabe allies, what is that theme? What do you see that as?
Well, I think it's going to take all of us. And that's why I'm supportive of all of the groups out here trying to make a difference. And I think that through our storytelling for many, many years, we have been, you know, we've been pushing the same narrative through our storytelling. And what's different now is that we have the ears of others. And hopefully we can take this moment together to do the right thing, to move the needle so that our children and grandchildren have a better shot at taking it where it really should be.
And becoming a Kenny Leon, maybe.
There you go. Absolutely. Be Kenny Leon and way more. Take you wherever you go.
Thank you, Kenny.